Welcome to We Hear Her. I am Erin Trenbeth Murray.
And I am Jennifer Bean.
We're here today with another amazing woman who's sharing her story and insights to lessons learned. Hi there, I'm Erin Trenbeth Murray, and I'm so happy to have you here for the We Hear Her podcast for women who succeed. I am absolutely thrilled today with our guests, as we're going to get a new perspective from one of our leaders in the community and who is a male ally of all women and women in leadership. We have Scott Anderson, who is the president and CEO for Zions Bank, and his trusted colleague, Sui Lang Panoke, who is the senior vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So between these two powerhouses, this is not intimidating at all, but they are so down to earth and so wonderful to give of their time that I'm really looking forward to this. So with that, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. And Sui Lang, before you came in, I was just talking a little bit with Scott about how much I have admired him for so many years from afar, as many members of the community. My background is all nonprofit work, so I saw the boards, the community work, him rolling up his sleeves at, refugee centers or, helping United Way or doing something at that level with teams, and then the leadership from the business community. There's just no one like him. What is it like to be on Scott's team? Just set me up a little bit there. No pressure.
In short, I've been describing it as dream job, dream boss, doing amazing work in the community. And I absolutely endorse everything you just shared. Scott Anderson is an icon in our community. It's truly an honor to work alongside with him. And when it comes to defining what male allyship is, 2 words, Scott Anderson. And it's not just because he's sitting right beside me. I'm sure many people would agree with me on that one.
Well, and I think that can be legitimate truth, because even when Scott Anderson was not sitting by you, when you first joined Women Who Succeed last spring, when we were just getting started, it was like our very first meeting. And you said, Erin, tell me about what your plan is for engaging men who are leaders and advocate for women in the community. So she's been singing your praises and that role way before today in this meeting. But Scott, I'd love to know from your perspective. I mean, obviously you have such a connection to human beings I'm sure across the world, but I see it in Utah. Male, female, all ages, all genders, all ethnicities, races. You just are such a very connected individual to people. But why specifically do you think it's important to be a champion for women and women in leadership?
Well, I've been lucky in that growing up, I've had very strong and remarkable women in my life who have helped shape my life, who have coached me, who have mentored me, and who have pushed me forward. And that starts with my grandmother, and she was a power force. She loved the community. She thought that people should do all they can to make the community a better place to live, and that we had an obligation to do it. And she wanted to make sure that all of her children and her grandchildren felt the same way. And so it started back with my grandmother, and we would spend summers together at her cabin on Hebgen Lake, and she would just mentor us and drill that into us. And it became clear in her comments that women were a force to be reckoned with, and that as a community, we needed to look at that and champion that and embrace that. And as I've looked at the history of Zions Bank, I think that we've gone through an interesting period of change. When the bank first opened up almost 150 years ago, the first 5 depositors, 5 of the first 15 were women. And that was remarkable back in those days, because usually a woman couldn't have their own account at a bank. But then over the years, some of that was lost. And we did an interesting survey with Pat Jones back in the mid-'80s. And we asked her to find out what people thought of the bank. And one of the questions she asked was, if you were to describe Zions Bank as a person, how would you describe them? And the response came back: a middle-aged, balding, overweight, white male who drives a Cadillac and lives in a gated community.
Wow.
And I thought, that is not the bank that I work for, or that I want to work for. And so we made a concerted effort to change the opinion and make sure that people understood that we were a bank that were championing all of our customers, including all of our women customers and potential women customers and potentially women-owned business customers. And I think that has paid off. And we did it because it was the right thing to do, but we did it because it was economically the right thing to do as well. So I have great admiration for the contribution that women make. And when you look at the women in this state, you included, and Sui Lang and a host of others, we are really lucky. And our economy is where it is, our community is where it is, because of their contribution and their leadership.
Well, I find that, wow, there's so much to unpack there. One thing that I'm really interested or curious about as you were describing that, and you think about, I think about women and the purchasing power and the expenditures that are spent out of the home, primarily through the decisions made by women, as research shows. And I'm thinking about the young mentees and the young women in the high schools that are going to see this podcast.
Yeah.
What advice or guidance could you give young women that are, say, in high school or college that would help them to be a little more economically stable as a young woman moving into adulthood? Is there a piece of advice that you could give them?
Well, I would just say to them, recognize your potential, and recognize your potential as someone who can make significant things happen in the community. And to do that, you have to have a high opinion of yourself, and you have to have a vision of what you can accomplish. They should not let people put them down. They should not follow stereotypes that they can't be engineers, or they can't be attorneys or doctors or whatever it be. And they just have to gird up and say, we are valuable people in the community. It's interesting, we support Gina Davis, the actress, and her nonprofit organization where she studies the image of women in the media. And she has made remarkable progress. And what she found is that the image that especially young girls have about themselves come from what they see on the screen. And she actually did fascinating research that you'd have, whether it be a Disney cartoon or whether it be a Western or a mystery movie, when there was a mob scene, she would count, and there were always 10 women and 90 men. Wow. And even if you looked at Disney, the cartoons, the champions, the heroes were always male, and the females were always beautiful, but not leading out. And she brought this to the attention of Disney, and they were thinking of doing a movie called Frozen. And in that movie, the hero was the sheep herder, and or the deer herder, and she said, it can't be. It has to be the sisters. And so they changed it, and obviously it was a huge success, but it had an impact, as they later did surveys, that young girls who saw the movie realized that they were powerful because they were women. And then she did a survey on on other movies, and where women were shown as, shooting a bow and arrow, or being an attorney or being a doctor, that all of a sudden in the communities, in high school students, women, young girls started to take archery, or they decided they wanted to be a doctor, and they changed the courses that they were taking. So the impact of the media can be powerful, and we have to make sure that we are there supporting those young girls from the very beginning, and ensuring that what they receive from us as feedback, from the media as impressions, that it supports them on what they can accomplish and what they should accomplish.
I just recently saw something on the Sunday morning show about Gina Davis and her work with that. So I'm going to have to do a little more digging. I appreciate you bringing that out. I think that leads me also to ask you, Sui Lang, when we're looking, you have a broader vision for diversity, equity, and inclusion at Zions Bank. How does what Scott was just describing about women's identity and that element of self-esteem and confidence that you can do whatever you want to do, and how does that boldness also fold into your work with DEI?
Critical role. Wholeheartedly agree with everything that Scott outlined. In terms of perception, right? It starts with perception, how we perceive ourselves, and oftentimes that is influenced by the models around us, the images in the media, community leaders, who is serving in public office at the time, and that contributes to our level of confidence or lack thereof. So these, diversifying, amplifying the voices of women, increasing the number of images that we're seeing in the media and in the community is critical to building that self-confidence in young women, and even women our age as well.
Exactly.
Right, it's a never-ending kind of evolution of process, right, of our pathway to leadership. Plays a critical role, and you can make that same argument as it pertains to race or ethnicity, people with disabilities who are differently abled than the majority of our colleagues inside and outside of the workplace. And so, but the women's piece plays a critical and central role to our diversity, equity, inclusion efforts because women make up overwhelming majority of our nation's population. Women are everywhere. Right?
We are everywhere. You
We are
can't hide from
everywhere,
us.
right? We're doing amazing things. I also see young women in the state of Utah women and girls, as the most valuable untapped resource in our country. And Erin, you and I have been doing this women's leadership development work for many years now. And I see the next stage of this bigger picture is building equitable partnerships with men.
Right.
Which is why relationships like a me and a Scott Anderson are so important. Nubia Pena and Governor Cox are so important, right? When women and men can build those relationships and view each other as equitable partners inside and outside of the workplace, that's how we'll begin to socialize that women can lead too, and just as competently and successfully as our male counterparts. That reinforces the confidence piece, and then we'll start to see a shift in the numbers. So,
and I would add to that Gina Davis has a theme in all of her work, and it's if she can see it, she can do it. And I
So
think
true.
when you think about that, the example of you and Sui Lang and Crystal Magdalene and Gail Miller and a host of other women, they have a huge impact on what young girls think they can accomplish when they see, Gail Miller coming from almost nothing to one of the wealthiest people in Utah, and see what she's accomplished. They are saying, I can do that. I can do that. And I think that's where this male allyship really becomes important, that we have to be there, the males have to be there to support that and to foster that and really make sure that young girls and women, as they grow and develop, have those opportunities to serve and grow and develop.
Absolutely. Leadership is leadership regardless if you're male or female.
Yeah.
And having a strong male role model or a strong female role model for young people is what we want. We want these kiddos to get to adulthood with a social and emotional savviness and emotional intelligence, that they're curious, that they're problem solvers, that I think that in Utah, we're number one in the country for young women who drop out after 2 years of college, which is a shame. There's so much unique talent here in Utah with work ethic, with our economy.
Yeah.
Like the stage is set. Yeah. And I think it really goes back. What's striking me as you're talking is, again, that role model. Seeing it. If I see that, and they say, whether it's Scott Anderson or Sui Lang saying, you can do this, Erin, you could absolutely do this, that lights a fire. That can light a fire in some junior at Kearns High School. We had a meet and greet at the Collert Village at the University of Utah with the mentees and the mentors this summer. And this young woman and her mother drove out from Peoa, Utah. And the mother was all teary-eyed, and she said to me, I cannot tell you how grateful I am. She's never been on a college campus. We needed this. This is all she's talking about now tonight, is that she wants to get a college degree. She wants to be at the university. And we just met her mentor, who is amazing. And so these women who are scientists and lawyers and executive leaderships and philanthropists and stay-at-home moms and lawyers that are just so strong, I think that's what we're hoping to do with Women Who Succeed. That's what Kathy and I are hoping comes out of it, that these young women can see it and they can grow out of it. Scott, what would you say if you I could be making a big assumption here. I'm making a big assumption, but let's say that you have some strong male executives and senior leadership on your team. If you were going to have a conversation just with them, a very casual conversation, what guidance or advice would you give to them about broadening or deepening their perspective of how to mentor a woman, how to help her grow in leadership, how to open doors for her? Yep. What advice would you say to them?
Well, the advice that I have given them is that they absolutely need to realize that they are as responsible for the development of their women employees as they are for their male employees. And they can't say, well, I feel uncomfortable going out and having lunch with them, and they just have to do that. They just have to step up and do it. I mean, that's the simple answer. And they have to do it because it's half of our population, women are. It's half of the employee base at Zions Bank. In fact, it's 51% of the employee base at Zions are women. It's our future. We need them. And we need them not only in entry-level teller work, but we need them as executive vice presidents and senior vice presidents and senior credit officers and HR and marketing people. And if we don't step up as male employees and encourage and develop that talent, we are really missing the boat.
Yeah, you're missing out if you miss those perspectives.
Yeah.
I mean, and Sui Lang, to your role with DEI, the diverse perspectives with age or gender or race or whatever, that when they come to the table, how does that strengthen an organization?
You're speaking to diversity of thought. That is invaluable in any organization, public, private sector. That is what contributes to creating a culture of inclusion where all employees can perform at their best. The ultimate goal with the DEI strategy at Zions Bank is high performance, right? We want to create that culture of inclusion, provide people with the resources they need, whether it be knowledge, support, whatever, to perform at their best. And that is diversity, equity, inclusion at its most advanced levels. And a lot of my role is driving and shifting culture. And so as Scott described, there are a lot of biases, right, that can seep their way into an organization's culture, like the perception of impropriety if I am seen in public with a female colleague for a lunch meeting, right? Things like that. And me having done a lot of work in areas like Washington, D.C., that's not necessarily an issue there.
Right.
But I have learned in areas of the country like Utah, it can still be a thing. Now, that is a social and cultural barrier to a woman leader's success. And back to a point that you guys both noted earlier, just as a leader, as a professional, if I want to advance in my career, I want to learn from the best.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a woman, it could be a man, but recognize the reality that we still live in, Erin, which is why programs like Women Who Succeed are so important. The overwhelming majority of leaders, presidents, CEOs of corporations, nonprofits, in government are still men. And so I want to learn from the best.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's a male serving in that role. And so the more open he is to sharing that knowledge, to investing in the next generation of women, will start to see that high level of leadership, executive leadership shift. And so we need commitment from all sides. And so male allies like Scott will play a critical role in shifting that culture.
And I would add to that I think it's important for a male, as they coach and mentor a female, that they have to recognize that in fact she is a female, you know. And we had the services of a woman named Barbara Annis, who ran the Harvard Women's Center, and she came out and helped teach us how to better communicate one to another. And she said she started out her career as a salesperson at Toyota, and she became one of the top salespeople, and they recognized it and they wanted to train her more, but she felt like they were training her as they would train a male employee, and they were missing what she brought to the table, which was different. And finally she decided that they didn't really want a female salesperson. They wanted a female who acted like a male.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought that was so insightful when she shared it. And we have to ensure, as Sui Lang said, that as we mentor, we are mentoring them to develop their own talents, and that we appreciate that they may think differently, they may respond differently, they may look at a situation differently, and when we accept that and value that, and then when we get together at the board table and talk, you know, there's a variety of opinions, there's a diversity of experience that's brought forth, and you make better decisions. But if you come with a diverse group, but you all have everyone think the same and speak the same, you lose that value.
Yeah.
And so it's dependent on me as a male that I try and develop that female employee to reach her top potential as a female.
Right. I had the opposite, because I had a staff of 600 and 91% were female. And I only had a handful of males. And I could see when we would get sucked into a very similar think tank, or the way I expected the male leadership. And instead of, I was too immature then and not able to understand really the beauty of diverse thought and how that strengthens the organization. And so I love what you're saying. Well, I think the last part that I'd love to talk with you a little bit about is final thoughts that you could share with young women. Not specifically, we talked about kind of financial planning and their educational piece, but this podcast will go out probably to all of our middle schools and high schools across the state. It's our women that are in Women Who Succeed will hear this, and I'm hoping even a broader audience of our male allies. But as a message in departing to the young women that may be 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, do you have any, Sui Lang, I'll start with you, and with Scott, if you could share maybe just a little words of wisdom of where you're at now in your career and what you hope for them.
So I would recognize gender dynamics will always play a role in the workplace. One very specific skill set that I would love to see more young women develop is how to build trusting, meaningful, productive relationships and partnerships with their male colleagues. Oftentimes, women's mentorship programs, it's women and women. It's women paired with other women. The speakers that they bring in to expose them to are women, which is all great. There's great value in being surrounded, again, with all these models of women. But if we could integrate the male allyship component into those programs, we would see greater success. And I'm already seeing a shift in the next generation. I have a daughter, we both have children around the same age who just started college, a freshman, 18-year-old. She is a young woman, and when I look at her inner social circle, it's half female, it's half male.
Yes.
And so they are less concerned about the gender thing. And so if we as organizations who are a little bit more, in the game, generation, in 2 years, we will celebrate 150th birthday in business. If we can adapt to those ways and shift our organizational culture to be more welcoming to that type of engagement, I think we'll see success.
Love that. More inclusive. My sons all hang out with young women.
Yeah.
It's very different than when I was young at that age. The
He will
girls
do
were
well.
over at this side, the guys were over there. So that was so well said. I appreciate that very much. Scott, any final words of
Well,
wisdom to the
I
young
would
women
just
out there?
say not to sell yourself short, and recognize the value that you bring, and have the confidence to speak up and to share your views, because they do matter and they will help to make better decisions when they're heard. And to reach out, as Sui Lang said, both to female role models as well as to male role models, and learn the best from the best. And I think how lucky we are as a community to have your organization there, to have you and Kathy reaching out, to help these young girls in junior high and high school recognize their potential, but recognize how much we need them. And I think it's interesting, as you go back in our history, Utah was a leader in women's suffrage. Utah was the first state to allow women to vote. Utah had the first woman to vote in a national election 150 years ago. And they have been a force in taming the wilderness and building this city and building this state. And we need to continue to have them do that. We need them to do that. And whether that be in the workforce or whether that be in the nonprofit world, whether that be in school, whatever it is, we need them there.
No words. I have goosebumps. That was incredible. Thank you both so
Thank you.
very, very
Our
much.
pleasure.
I could have listened to you for 24 hours. I could have sat here and just asked open-ended questions and listened, and I would just like to say how grateful we are for Sui Lang and Scott Anderson for being here today, and our community is very blessed and lucky to have you. The bank as well, certainly with your leadership, but you're far beyond leaders in the business world. You're leaders in our community, and I'm so grateful you're here.
Well, thank you.
So thanks for being here today.
An honor.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Erin, for your leadership.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for taking time to hear her. Join our efforts and learn more at womenwhosucceed.org. A big thank you to our sponsor, the Clark and Christine Ivory Foundation.